It's proven that there's a decline in bee populations. And what is the main cause, if you had to say?
I would not be able to say what the main cause is.
Yeah.
I would say that I am aware of three causes. Number one is the Africanization.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is the varroa mites. And number three is microencapsulation of pesticides. Not pesticides in general, the microencapsulation of pesticides.
All right.
Okay, microencapsulation is the process that individually coats the particles of pesticide to keep them from breaking down out in the field, so that they give the grower more bang for his buck,
Mm-hmm.
keeping the pests off of his crops. The downside is they're picked up by the honeybees that are pollinating those crops, brought back to the colonies, and as they break down in the bee's colony, they contaminate the hive, and the bees die off, or the colony becomes weakened to the point where it can't survive the winter or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say it's a blanket, it's the fault of pesticides, it's not. That's not really true. It is in an indirect way. Let's face it, we need pesticides. In today's world, a whole lot of people would starve without them, or be sick without them, or everything else. It's this one method that really is a good deal for farmers and growers, but the unintended consequence was it's very deleterious to honeybees.
Yeah.
That said, they've been working on it, on mitigating that problem for 25 or 30 years now. How much progress they've had with it, I don't know. So honeybees will pick up nectar that has been developed on plants that have had pesticides on them, but I don't think that's near the problem that microencapsulation was or
All
is.
right.
So if you want to make whatever notes you want on the check, or you got your recorder
kind of
going.
forge that. Yeah.
Oh.
You don't need to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Explain the varroa mites. What is it? What does it do to the honeybees?
It's been a long time, and it was just coming into play about the time I was getting out of the business.
Yeah.
They were mites that infected, if I remember correctly, the tracheal, they were tracheal mites and varroa mites. Tracheal mites infected the trachea of the honeybees. Varroa mites, if I remember correctly, infected the respiratory system, so maybe the two are tied together. And that was a big problem. They were having very limited success in being able to treat for varroa and or tracheal mites. And these were just a naturally occurring parasite that was attacking honeybees, and it was not looking very pretty for a long time. That was then, this is now. Hopefully and probably they've made some progress on that front, but I just don't know. It was just coming about the time I was getting away from it. And I had no real it didn't negatively affect me much, if any at all. I was only aware of it because I subscribed to a couple of publications, trade publications then. One was Gleanings in Beekeeping, one was called American Bee Journal, and they were both on top of it in a big way. They may or may not be in print anymore, whatever, but they were the industry standards on stuff that was affecting the industry, pro and con. Tracheal mites and varroa mites were big ones coming on strong in the late 70s and early 80s.
All right. And the third you mentioned was?
Africanization.
Yeah.
Africanization was the same thing. About the time I was getting out of it, that was a we're all going to die scenario. Bees were going to overrun the country, everybody's going to get stung to death, and all of this.
Kind of the opposite of today.
I don't know what...
Today they're all going to die off, and then we'll die with...
Whatever happened, I don't know, but there was a flurry of activities. Until that time, you could keep bees just about any place. All sorts of local municipalities and feel-good do-gooders and everything else wanted to protect the children, the dogs, all of this kind of stuff. And bit by bit, there were areas that you weren't allowed to keep honeybees any longer. So I heard through trade publications and other people who I knew. It never affected me. I never had a problem with Africanized bees taking over. That's a bad word. But the problem was Africanized bees are much more aggressive than native honeybees, and they do not produce the amount of honey that native honeybees do. They also don't pollinate as well as honeybees do. Because of those things, by inbreeding with the native population, we were going to be ending up with a smaller honey crop, less effective pollination, and more aggressive bees to deal with. A problem that really only presented itself to beekeepers, not to the public at large. The fear was that these bees were going to interfere with the public at large, and that part I don't think ever happened.
When you worked as a beekeeper, did you happen to notice any die-offs in your hives that were suspicious?
Never anything suspicious. There were a couple things. Occasionally hives would just die off. What would happen is when the queen would swarm, I don't need to get into all
In this world, we need honeybees. That's a fact. There are only 5 organisms in the world that we truly need. And if any one of these organisms were to die out, then so would we.
Mm-hmm.
There's no surviving without them. One dying puts everything out of order. Honeybees are the main pollinators of the world, which millions of crops need pollination by animals, and we can't figure out how to do it. So there's no way we could get around needing them.
Yeah. So obviously, honeybees are important for natural ecosystems, but back to the topic of agriculture, they're also necessary to pollinate crops in addition to producing honey. It's the western honeybees are put in fields, for instance, in South Texas, in the orchards. The best way for beekeepers to make money is to put their hives in the mix with all the citrus trees, the grapefruits and the oranges, etc.
So going off of that, everybody needs a honeybee, okay? Small businesses, big businesses. There's no way to just go on without them. I mean, of course, we have bats, which kill the insects. We have butterflies, which also spread pollen, just not to the same degree. We also have animals such as deer that eat the seeds of trees and spread them throughout.
Then there are self-pollinating crops and for like pine trees, which pollinate by wind. Other trees do the same. But for the most part, the crops that you eat that you can't survive with for, 3 weeks, you can go without food.
Yeah.
I mean, you would die without honeybees. They are essential for human existence.
Yeah, I mean, like, there are about 114 crops that are really highly marketed and that are sold worldwide, that humans consume daily.
Yeah.
And among those, 87 of those crops can only be pollinated by the honeybee. So that's over halfway. The rest of them aren't that important. I mean, they have rice, rye, wheat. Those don't necessarily need to be pollinated by honeybees. They can self-pollinate, they can be pollinated.
But for the
by
most
butterflies.
part, those are pollinated by honeybees.
Yes.
And rice in the east and other cereals in the Western Hemisphere, those are staples of different cultures' diets, and they are necessary to sustain those populations.
Well, for 22,000 years, humans have learned how to domesticate honeybees, and we've been using them. It's kind of what helped us come out of an ice age. 22,000 years ago, the world was 34 degrees chillier than it is today. And most of the reason that the climate has gone up is because of honeybees. Now, I know that leads to global warming, all the greenhouse gases, but it can be argued that we would have died out a long time ago if this would have never happened. There's no way an entire species can live through an ice age for such a long time.
So that's it. Honeybees are extremely important. You need to do whatever you can to help them out, and hopefully we can find a solution to such a daunting problem that could have a pretty dark, could lead very badly for the human race.
Oh yeah, there is no doubt. We need the honeybees, and we need to do more effort to save them.
Take care of the earth, folks.